Right. Good morning, Gershon. I'm
Good
sorry,
morning.
but I tried the
No,
best way possible to make the time clear between the two. But
no, I would got lost. I'm doing my Shabbat cooking. So
okay, I think I prefer the other one. We'll go with that. But lovely, lovely, lovely to welcome you this morning.
thank
And
you.
let's turn to being official. So, good morning and welcome to the JW3 Friday briefing. And a special welcome to our guest this morning, Gershon Baskin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I wish everyone a Pesach Sameach, a happy and peaceful Pesach in these difficult times that make it very strange to know just how to celebrate Pesach. But I know from everyone I've spoken to that everyone's managed to make it meaningful and still a celebration, because that's what is incumbent upon us. So many of you will know Gershon Baskin. He's now the Middle East Director of International Communities Organization, a UK-based NGO that works in conflict zones with failed peace processes. How sad that that is necessary. He's a veteran Israeli peace activist who's advised 2 Israeli prime ministers on the peace process and also negotiated with Hamas on behalf of Israel for 17 years. Very pleased to have known Gershon as the years have gone by. So it's an impressive qualification to address us this morning. Please, as always, put your questions in the chat and I will pose them to Gershon if time allows. Gershon, it's not an easy task, but what's uppermost in your mind this week that you would like to share with us? Thank you, and over to you.
Okay, well, the most important thing always since October 7th is that we still have 133 Israeli hostages in Gaza. We're now in day 203, if I'm correct, that these hostages are in Gaza. There are no genuine negotiations taking place. There are no direct negotiations taking place between Israel and Hamas. There is an Egyptian delegation, a high-level Egyptian intelligence delegation on their way here to Israel this morning with proposals. But the basic bottom line of why we're stuck and why we have no agreement is mainly because Hamas has issued a demand that whatever agreement is released that will bring the Israeli hostages home, Israel is required to end the war and to withdraw from Gaza. That is the bottleneck that we are facing because Israel has failed to produce any kind of viable political initiative or scheme or plan which enables us to turn the keys of Gaza over to an alternative Palestinian leadership that does not support the armed struggle, does not support terrorism, accepts the idea that a Palestinian state would be demilitarized. And because Mr. Netanyahu, who since 2009 has developed a strategy to enable Israel to say to the Israeli people and to the world that we want peace, we have no partner in the Arab world. The reality today is that more and more people around the world and in the region in particular, including amongst Palestinians, are saying the two-state solution is back on the table as it hasn't been for years. And because the Israeli government that we have today refuses to recognize the ultimate necessity of enabling the Palestinian people to have self-determination, to enjoy the same rights that Israel enjoys for itself, we are stuck in a reality where ending the war in order to bring home the hostages is in essence an Israeli surrender to Hamas demands, which would leave Hamas in control of Gaza upon an Israeli withdrawal. And that kind of puts into question of what the whole war was about over these last 6 months. Why did 600 Israeli soldiers die since October 7th in defending Israel when we end up having a war that leaves Hamas in place in Gaza? Recognize that Hamas is weak. Hamas has been decimated. Most of its weapons have been destroyed. Most of its underground network has been destroyed. Most of its stockpile of weapons and its chain of command has been broken. But nonetheless, Israel has withdrawn already from most of Gaza. And wherever Israel withdraws from, Hamas pops up again, either in the form of civil government or in the form of armed insurgency against Israeli troops. In the absence of an Israeli plan to withdraw from Gaza and turn it over to some responsible Palestinian alternative, it requires Israel to remain in Gaza for a long time. And what we're facing now is what could be the second mud of Lebanon or the sands of Gaza or the Americans in Vietnam. I'll remind everyone here that after the 1982 Israeli attack of Lebanon, Israel remained in Lebanon for 18 years. It took 18 years for Israel to withdraw from Lebanon. And without a political plan that enables Israel to withdraw from Gaza without surrendering to Hamas, we are stuck. And 133 Israeli hostages are stuck. We don't know how many of them are alive. The official number is that 34 are dead. Most people within the Israeli national security establishment talk more about probably 70 of them are dead. Hamas has issued numbers that are even much higher. And we don't know. In my mind, the most important thing in Israeli society, the thing that makes Israel a special country and society, that enables us to have solidarity in this country, is the fact that we don't leave anyone behind, that we won't tolerate a situation where civilians were hoisted out of their homes in their pajamas on a Shabbat Simchat Torah morning, where the Israeli state and the Israeli army failed to protect them because they were busy somewhere else. And this can go on. It is very clear to me that Netanyahu, who's a hostage of his own government, has put the war efforts in front, but because of extreme international pressure, the war is basically stopped in Gaza. We're now on the cusp of an attack on the final 20% of the Gaza Strip between Khan Yunis and Rafah, where there are about 1.5 million Palestinians, most of them displaced people, who have no homes to return to because Israel has destroyed 70% of the Gaza Strip. Palestinian figures on casualties now are above 40,000 because there are thousands underneath rubble of buildings that were bombed by Israel. I think it's fair to assume that a number, maybe even a large number of Israeli hostages are underneath that rubble and may never be returned to us. In my mind, the most urgent thing that we as Israelis need to do is to get this government to resign and call for new elections. 2/3 of the Israeli public in latest surveys say that we need to have elections in 2024. The problem is that a majority of those 2/3 still say it must be at the end of the war. But there is no end to the war. We don't know how it's going to end. We don't know when it's going to end. And therefore, I think that we will see after Pesach more and more Israelis taking to the streets, demanding that this government resign. This government failed to protect Israel on October 7th. Benjamin Netanyahu, who until October 7th presented himself as the greatest leader of the Jewish people since Moses, literally, he has said this. He will go down in history as the worst leader that the Jewish people have ever had. We are a traumatized society. We are not living in post-trauma. We are still in the trauma of October 7th. We have not gone beyond October 7th. I was just listening to the radio as I was cooking. Every discussion on the radio that I heard was about October 7th. People telling their stories over and over again, and new stories are being told every day. And we are stuck there. More Jews were killed on October 7th in one place at one time than at any time since the Holocaust. And we Jews in Israel, and I think Jews around the world, are living the trauma. Without comparison, it is important to know that the Palestinian people are reliving the Nakba of 1948. that they are also traumatized beyond imagination. Every Palestinian, not just in Gaza, in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, inside of Israel, and in the Palestinian diaspora, are living the trauma of 1948 once again. They are a traumatized society. And this is a reality that we need to face, because there will be a day after. And on that day after, there are going to remain 7 million Israeli Jews and 7 million Palestinian Arabs living between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea on a land that they both claim as their own, that they both claim that they take their identity from and give their identity to. And the most surprising thing that's happened in this war, in my mind, is that the two-state solution is back in front of us, and that increasing number of countries around the world, including the UK, are talking about recognizing the Palestinian state. I will say that the UK abstention in the Security Council this past week on the recognition of the Palestinian state should be an embarrassment to all of you. There is historic responsibility here, and we have countries like the UK and the US and most of the OECD nations that have been talking about a two-state solution for 30 years and only recognize one of those states. The fact is that of the 193 member states of the United Nations, 139 countries already recognize the state of Palestine. Of the 193 member states of the United Nations, 165 of them recognize the state of Israel. And the call of anyone who's interested in this land that we live on here, ever living in peace, the call should be for all 193 member states of the United Nations to recognize both states, the state of Israel and the state of Palestine, because there is no other possible solution to this conflict, and there must be a solution. We've been killing each other for more than 100 years now over a territorial expression of our identity. No one is getting all of it. The only way to live here without killing each other is to recognize that we have to recognize that we all have the same right to the same rights, and that means self-determination. I'm surprised by this outcome of the two-state solution being back, because I thought it was dead. I've spent most of my adult life trying to foster the two-state solution, trying to figure it out. For 24 years, I ran a joint Israeli-Palestinian public policy think tank and do tank. We held more than 2,000 professional working groups of Israelis and Palestinians trying to figure out how to make the two-state solution work on every single issue, on borders, security, economics, water, agriculture, antiquities, tourism, health, you name it, environment. And there isn't a single issue that we don't have solutions for. What we have lacked over the years, since at least the Second Intifada, in the year 2000, when Palestinians decided that they were going to kill us by blowing themselves up in buses and cafes, is a belief that while we want peace, the other side doesn't. And unfortunately, over the last 24 years, our leaders and our people have given enough credible evidence to each other that there is no partner for peace on either side. And that needs to change. One last sentence before we open it up for discussion. The two-state solution in a Palestinian state is not a reward for Hamas. It is not a reward for terrorism. It is a reward to the people of Israel and Palestine who want to live in peace. It is against what Hamas has believed in all these years. Hamas was created at the time of the First Intifada in defiance of any kind of peace process with Israel. Things are changing in Hamas. We heard yesterday one of the most extremist leaders of Hamas, Dr. Khalil al-Hayya, the deputy of Yahya Sinwar, who said we would support a two-state solution. This is new. These are new words that we're hearing from Hamas. Perhaps then some kind of recognition on the part of people, even in Hamas, of the disaster that they have brought down on their people. One thing must happen, and it must happen quickly. We need new leaders. We need new leaders in Israel. We need new leaders in Palestine. And whatever happens in the future must be done in a regional framework. We saw the alliance of defense that took place on the night when Iran attacked Israel. That alliance of defense needs to be brought to the table the next time we get around to peace negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians, because we need to create a regional architecture of security and stability and economic development and dealing with climate change and all the rest. And it has to be done in a regional framework with the Abraham Accords countries, with Egypt and Jordan that we have peace with for decades already, bringing in the Emirates and Bahrain and Morocco. And Saudi Arabia is the most important piece of the puzzle to bring to the table. And that's how we need to move forward. There are Palestinian partners for this. There are the opposition within the Fatah movement to President Mahmoud Abbas, who is now 89 years old, I think, in his 18th year of a 4-year term. And whatever happens in the future, we have to recognize that it must be without Hamas in charge and without Abbas in charge. We need new leaders. And it's happening. It's going to happen. Our leaders will have their day of reckoning. Netanyahu, who refuses to take any responsibility for October 7th, will be held to task. We will have a national commission of inquiry headed by a Supreme Court judge, and they have no way of not putting responsibility on the person who has run this country most of the years since 2009. He will be gone. Most of the heads of our security and intelligence will be gone. And we have to remember that we had 40 weeks of intensive demonstrations in Israel with hundreds of thousands of Israelis taking to the street to protect Israel's democracy. There's a lot of work to do on Israel's democracy. There needs to be full equality between the Jewish and Palestinian citizens of Israel, because there is no democracy where there are two strata of citizens based on ethnicity or nationality or religion. So we need to work on that, and we need to protect our liberal democracy, and we need new leaders. So why don't I end here and open it up for questions and discussion? I'm sure there are a lot of people who probably didn't agree with everything I said.
Thank you so much, Gershon. That was as brilliant as I expected and more so. So thank you.
Thank you.
So at the moment, the question's all around Hamas. So do add some in that are other than that as well. I'm going to do them separately because people have asked them. So start with, do you think Hamas has become more violent more extreme over the last few years? Or do you, I think
what happened on October 7th was something that was planned for at least 2 years. And Hamas has been stockpiling and smuggling weapons for years for their day of reckoning. It turns out that about a year ago, Yahya Sinwar and his group of people in Hamas held a full-day conference in Gaza under the title, The Final Promise. There is some kind of distorted view within Islam, and this is not formal Islam, and I think it's a distortion of Islam, but there's some distorted view of a final day of reckoning with the non-Muslims, where anyone who does not become a Muslim would be killed, including, of course, all the Jews who would not accept Islam. And they held a conference, a full-day conference a year ago, last summer, the summer before, about this final promise with detailed plans, to the extent that they had even delegated people who are going to be held responsible as governors of the area of Ashkelon and Kiryat Gat and Tel Aviv and Haifa. And they gave out tasks to people who should plan how they're going to govern these areas in the aftermath when they conquer Israel. I know a Palestinian from Hamas who said in the aftermath of October 7th, if we knew it was going to be so easy to breach the border, we would have sent 10,000 troops and we would have conquered Tel Aviv. And they might have, if they had sent 10,000 troops over, because our borders were defenseless. They were busy in the West Bank because over the last 2 decades, the Israel Defense Force became the Israeli Occupation Police Force. They were not on the borders. They were not a defense force. But that's a side issue. Hamas has always believed in the armed struggle. They have demonstrated its use during the Second Intifada with the most brutal attacks imaginable, at that time primarily done by suicide bombers. After the end of Second Intifada, they pretty much stopped the suicide bombers, and they took to rockets and building tunnels and the underground network. They never left the armed struggle as an option. They tried to create an illusion that there was a political wing and a military wing of Hamas, and these were 2 separate entities, when in fact They were always one entity. There was never really a separation between them. There is no doubt in my mind that the political leadership of Hamas, even in exile, knew what was planned. Maybe they did not know the exact date that it was going to happen, but they knew that a major event, military event, was going to take place. They sent some of their key people out of Gaza prior to October 7th to be both negotiators and spokespeople for Hamas during the war that took place. From what I understand, they expected of the 1,500 elite force soldiers that they sent into Israel, their expectation was that 1,000 of them would be killed. And that was not a problem, because part of the distorted ideology within Hamas's understanding of Islam is that it's a commandment to die as a martyr for Palestine. It's your duty. Yahya Sinwar was quoted during the corona outbreak, during COVID, that it would be a disaster if he were to die from COVID and not die fighting for Palestine, not die as a martyr, killing Israeli Jews along with him. So violence has been part of Hamas since its outset.
And the outset was after the Oslo Accords, is that correct?
No, the outset, Hamas was born in the First Intifada. The First Intifada began officially on the 9th of December 1987. Hamas claims that it carried out its first attack against Israel on the 7th of December. So they claim that they were 2 days ahead of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, beginning of the Intifada. And during the first years of the Intifada, every 9th of the month of the year was a strike day initiated by the United Command of the Intifada, which were the PLO forces. And on the 7th of every month, Hamas held a strike.
Thank you. You've mentioned Hamas only in terms of negotiations. Do you envisage anybody else being able to take that over, or do you think it has to be with Hamas?
I think the best situation would be if there were Palestinians that Israel was talking to about taking the keys of Gaza on the day that Israel withdrew, and that they were taking on responsibility for bringing back the hostages. There are people within the opposition to Abbas within Fatah who have said that they would do that. They are not being engaged by Israel. No one is talking to them. These are people around Marwan Barouti, who's in prison, Mohammed Dahlan, who's in exile in Abu Dhabi and is very close to the president of the United Arab Emirates, Dr. Nasser al-Kidwa, who was a foreign minister. He was the PLO representative in the United Nations for 15 or 16 years. He's the nephew of Yasser Arafat. He's living in exile in Nice now. He was president of the Yasser Arafat Foundation. And in May of 2021, he was heading an alternative list to the official list of Fatah in the elections that never took place, a joint list supported by Marwan Barouti and Mahmoud Abbas. President Abbas threw him out of Fatah and basically put him into exile. 2 years ago, Dr. Nasser went back to Gaza, opened up Arafat's house and started working from Arafat's house. Both the people of Marwan Barouti, Mohammed Dahlan, and Nasser al-Qidwa have been in discussions with Hamas about taking over Gaza, about the agreement of integrating political forces within Hamas who would agree to a two-state solution, integrating Hamas military people who would agree to be subjected to the authority of a Palestinian civilian government. And these people have said also that they are committed to nonviolence, to demilitarization, to there being only one security force under a Palestinian government, which they would control, and it would not be offensive force. One of the people involved in this group, in fact, has even said the most extreme thing, one of the most extreme thing is two things, actually, this person has said. We recognize that the Jewish people have always been in the land of Israel and have a connection to the land of Israel, and we have no objection to that. But we want to remind our Jewish friends that they were never in the land by themselves. There are always others, and we are the others today. The second thing that he said is that if he were foreign minister of the state of Palestine or the Palestinian Authority, they have 133 embassies around the world. He said, I would close 100 of them and open up chapters of the Palestinian government in 100 Israeli towns and cities, because it's the Israeli people that we need to talk to, not all the people all around the world. It's them that we need. We need to conquer Israeli fear. Our enemy is not Israel or Israelis. Our enemy is Israeli fear. So there are people who are coming out of this war looking at the disaster of Gaza and saying, no more. We need a different strategy. We have been working for 76 years on a failed strategy with leaders who have led us nowhere.
Gosh, thank you. It's really encouraging to hear some words of optimism, which
I
we
know, it's really
hear on
rare.
these Fridays.
Yes.
These obviously are individuals that need to be encouraged. Do you think Hamas, and this will be the last question, by the way, I'm sorry that we can't get through them all. Do you think that the Hamas right wing will allow these individuals who want to make progress and talk will be allowed to live, because we know that they can take out their own as well as ours?
No, I think that the entire Hamas leadership will have a very difficult time finding an insurance company that will issue them a life insurance policy. Not from within, but from Israel. The long arm of Israel will reach,
Okay.
I believe, over the years to come, most, if not all, of the Hamas leaders who were responsible for October 7th, who celebrated October 7th. That's at least the Israel I know. Here's something that most people don't know. Every single person who had anything to do with the capture of Gilad Shalit and holding him in captivity for 5 years and 4 months is no longer alive. Israel reached every single one of them. And I would think that that is probably what's going to happen to the Hamas leadership over the years to come. Unless, of course, a miracle happens and we have some kind of real peace that develops and we all, we'll always have one eye looking backwards and remembering, but maybe we will come to a time where we'll also have one eye looking forward and understanding that killing each other, even killing the really bad people, is not really the way forward. Revenge is never a good thing.
That's for sure. And I think, however, it is part of the structure of our life, as is what is going on.
It certainly is.
I managed to ruin your optimistic tone by asking that last question, but just a couple of the messages that say it as well as I could say it. Thank you, Gershon, for a strong voice and a clear view, which gives me hope. And Jonathan Paris has joined us, who's one of my presenters on Israel in the building, conveys his best wishes to you. I do hope that you will be able to join us again on one of these Friday briefings. At the moment, we have no intention to stop them. We'd really like to hear more from you. And also, of course, I would love to invite you to JW3 when you're in London so that we can meet up in person.
I will be coming to London sometime in the next couple of months because we're doing work on the Cameroon conflict. We'll be training negotiators from the Anglophone and the Francophone communities to rebuild a peace process there. And that training will be taking place in London.
My goodness. Okay, we definitely want to book you for that. Let me know.
Okay.
Let's stay in touch, and we'll get that date in as soon as possible.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Gershon. I really appreciate you joining us, and I hope nothing's burning in the kitchen.
No, I shut it all off. Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom to everyone. Thank you all for joining us, and do keep in touch with JW3. Do come and do a padlock if you haven't done one on the Lovelock Bridge, and stay tuned to what's happening in the building and online. Gershon, thank you so much. We wish you a very peaceful, safe Shabbat. Shabbat shalom.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.